1 second. All right. I can feel that by the end of this video, I'm going to end up having more people sending me hate messages.
I want people to go and find your article on Liberation News, and to look at this 30-year period carefully, and to see how it evolved, because this is basically according to a plan. In 2014, when the U.S. overthrew the Yanukovych government in Ukraine, the neutral government, the government that wanted to balance between East and West and pledged not to join NATO, and replaced it with a pro-NATO government, Victoria Nuland, who was a Obama State Department official, said we've given Ukraine $5 billion since 1991. That was through the NED, National Endowment for Democracy, so called. None of that money was for democracy. That money was designed to bring Ukraine influence. And the Ukraine was the second most important republic, or let's put it this way, the second biggest republic inside the Soviet Union after Russia. And it was the closest ally of the Soviet Union from an economic and military point of view. Uh, yeah, that's all real. And when you hear what China's saying, when the U.S. talks about Xinjiang in the western part of China, or Hong Kong, or Tibet, or Taiwan, the idea of dismemberment is, like right at the front and center of these countries that feel targeted by the U.S. The U.S. did end up breaking up the Soviet Union. It did encourage and facilitate, stimulate, and then support the breakup, the dismemberment of the Soviet Union, the second biggest power. Like, why wouldn't they try to dismember Russia?
I mean, Biden wanted to dismember Iraq. And I mean, I think
He,
people will
he actually
remember that.
proposed
It was his biggest proposal when he was the senator, saying this is how we solve it. And when he ran for president against Obama in 07, that was his biggest thing, break up Iraq.
Yeah, have a Sunni Iraq, a Shiite Iraq, a Kurdish Iraq. Like, use ethnicity as a way to divide up multinational republics that were not easily controlled by U.S. imperialism.
I hope what Brian Becker and Eugene Pryor was talking about there kind of resonate with people. One thing I love about Breakthroughs News, and why I'm a proud member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, is because we always go into in-depth history. We don't just go black and white like how the news, which I'm about to get into real good, real quick, how the news here just all of a sudden just shifts to the same message. And there's no nuance to actually educate the people on what's going on. They do that on purpose. They do not want to educate you on the situation. They want to tell you how to feel. They want to tell you how to think. That is the goal of Western media. And that is why they come off as being state government affiliated media, which honestly, in my opinion, they are. Corporate America, total interest. Total interest is to be in alignment when it comes to um, foreign policy. Because you know who benefits off these foreign policy? Corporations. Corporations benefits off of how they mentioned Iraq being dismantled so they can make money. What we went to the Middle East for? Oil. What else we went to the Middle East for? Heroin, opium, drugs. How much money does the big pharma make? How much money does the oil companies make? It is never in the mainstream media interest to ever discuss what really needs to be discussed. And if you saw the headline of what they had in the front, I'm going to show you again. It says, West talked peace deal. Tanked. The West tanked peace deal. Now they're quoting from Putin. But there is also many other outlets, which I have shared on my Instagram page as well too, on how the West collaborated to end the peace agreements between Russia and Ukraine, to end the talks that progressed up to Russia and Ukraine. The Minsk agreement, which people should also look up as well too. The Minsk agreement was used to end the Civil War. Now, this is before Zelensky, but was even in power. We're talking about the asshole that was put in place when the U.S. backed a coup to take over the Yanukovych regime, which was a neutral regime, which they explained so eloquently. Why do you never hear about peace being a part of the talks of how we should proceed with conflicts? Why don't you ever hear about peace being a topic on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or NBC? Why do they stray away from wanting peace? Let me tell you, you ever wonder why there's so many CIA whistleblowers? Because the CIA does not move peacefully. The CIA moves in so many ways that even 20 years later, you don't even fucking know what they did. You find out 20 years later what they did 20 years later. That's how embedded the CIA is within this world and how they intervene in these countries. And they have a lot of whistleblowers. Why? Because a lot of people join the CIA to think that they're making a change. A lot of people join the CIA because they're sold to think that we are protecting our country. We are expanding our influence for the greater good, when really we're expanding our influence because the unipolar world has always had to answer to us. And when the United States wants something, they take it. This is why you see this is why you see in the Donbass right now, and the Lugansk, Dugansk republics. They are currently, right now as we speaking, voting to join the Russian Federation, just as Crimea has done in the past. It was never stolen. But what is the rebuttal to the United States? This is illegitimate. Well, let me tell you something on the contrast of this. Why, when they say it's illegitimate for this region or country to vote to be a part of the Russian Federation, when Puerto Rico never had a chance to vote, when the Samoan Islands never had a chance to vote, and even before Puerto Rico even was taken by our government, they never had a chance to vote to be a part of Spain. They were forced to be a part of Spain for 400 years. So these white Western nations, they had the right to colonize and force territories to be under our orbit. But people buy and say it's illegitimate for another region or a country to vote to join under a country that's an enemy to US. Voting is illegitimate. Voting is illegitimate. I think this rhetoric that they give, it's not, I think. You should know for a fact it's all one-sided. For it was more of a non-biased approach. You will see this news outlet pushing up the war propaganda, and this news outlet calling out, why don't we have diplomacy? Why none of you that make millions of dollars on that fucking teleprompter ever mention diplomacy and peace? Why can't we have diplomacy and peace? Why can't we push for diplomacy and peace? I want y'all to think about that. While we continue to hear Biden yelling about nukes, Putin saying, if you guys are going to use these weapons, then we will respond. Instead of listening to all that, why does this continue? Why does it not de-escalate? Russia was wrong for invading Ukraine, and I've said that before. But the U.S. was also wrong for meddling into Ukraine's affairs and toppling over Yanukovych's government just so they could plant a regime that was inspired by neo-Nazis in Ukraine. They weren't all neo-Nazis, but there was a huge influence with the percentage that they were in. with this plan. And that started the reason why the Donbass, Lugansk, the Lugansk regions wanted to break away from Ukraine. That started a civil war. And if you don't know about this, I expect you to please, instead of wasting your time going into the DMs and calling out people, actually look into it instead of calling it Russian propaganda, because you are disrespecting the lives of over 14,000 and counting ethnic Russian Ukrainians who have died, murdered, was shelled by that fucking Kiev regime. You're disrespecting their lives. Why can't they have any acknowledgement? Why can't these people that hid in their basements have any fucking acknowledgement? Where's their freedom? Where's their freedom at? It's not going to be under this regime. Their freedom was under a neutral government, not a government that chose sides, a neutral government. And this is why we have today this voting that's happening now, because they only see protection under Russia. I need people to please focus for a minute, take time to understand this before we argue points that we don't get. I could bring people up here as much as I want that came from those regions, that are journalists that saw those regions. It doesn't mean squat if you don't believe them, because it's too thick here. The propaganda is way too thick here. And workers don't get it. They don't get what it's like to have so many borders around you. And you're seeing the US turn all these countries, or attempt to turn all these countries, into NATO allies where they can park nuclear weapons right at your front door. Because that's what happens when they become NATO allies. They give them the weapons and they park nuclear weapons right at the front door. Imagine how's that feel being Russian. And you're just a working class person like me. And you're fearful that one day the US will come and destroy everything that you fought for. Everything. There's two sides of the coin here. And you're not a good guy when you have over 900 bases surrounding governments that you do not like. You're a bully. The United States is a fucking bully. And that's really all I have to say in that matter. So go ahead, guys, with your DM.
I appreciate what you do, because I do believe that the work that you're doing, and so folks watching and listening, please support Jamar, because he and others like him are the linkage that allows all those parts of the body to communicate with each other, to interact with each other, to link with one another. Without this communication piece, we're just all doing our things separately. And so Please support this platform, other platforms, other people like Jamar who are doing this work, because that's what we need to move this movement forward, grow it, build it, and eventually win.